They buried it not in dirt in silence 1834, Central Kentucky. 2 boys, not yet 12, disappear into the hills behind their family's estate. 3 days later they return. But they are not the same. They speak in broken, whispering tongues no one recognizes. Their eyes never blink. They draw symbols, spirals, blades, gates that no one taught them. And at night the animals won't go near them. The Morrison family, once proud, once powerful, begins to rot from the inside. The mother disappears into the woods one morning. The father stops eating, staring at the cellar door for hours. Neighbors say they hear voices under the floorboards, voices that speak in pairs. Then, one autumn evening, the house burns. Nothing remains but the stone steps, and those steps lead down. The local papers called it a tragedy. The church called it demonic affliction. The county archives. They don't call it anything at all. Because all records stopped that year. But something was left behind. A pattern, a frequency, a twin current still pulsing beneath Kentucky soil. They want you to believe it was madness, that the boys were sick. That what happened wasn't real. But if it wasn't real, why did 3 separate US presidents make private visits to that site in the next 60 years? You weren't supposed to hear this. But now the gate is open. And what's behind it has been waiting a very long time. The Morrison twins were inseparable, Elijah and Elias, 1 minute apart, one mind between them. Born under a blood moon in January 1822 during a thunderstorm that struck the church steeple clean in half. The locals called them storm children, but they weren't just boys, they were mirrors. They finished each other's sentences, drew the same pictures without looking, screamed at the same time in their sleep. Their mother said they came from somewhere else, that she'd heard them speaking to something through the cradle rails before they could walk. Then, on April 9th, 1834, they vanished. No footprints, no torn fabric, no blood. Just 2 indentations in the soil behind the barn, like something had pressed down hard, then lifted them away. The search went on for 72 hours. Dogs refused to track. Compasses spun in circles. The sky turned strange, red at noon, black at dawn. Then they came back, silent, soaked, starving, but smiling. They wouldn't say where they'd been, not at first, but their drawings changed. They started carving patterns into their skin. They called each other by numbers. They said the names of things that had no meaning. Nithra, Kalvek, the dreaming mouth. One night, Elias whispered something into his mother's ear. She didn't speak again for 6 weeks. And when she did, she only said one sentence. There's another set. Another set. Another pair, another place, just like this one. On the other side of the vale, the Morrison homestead sat on the edge of Rowan County, built from ash wood and local limestone. 2 stories, 7 rooms, and 1 secret it was never meant to hold. The locals said it was wrong, the way it stood, too symmetrical, too silent. Like it was listening. Every mirror in that house warped slightly inward. Every window faced another window. Every door creaked open toward you, even if you pushed it shut. There were no birds on the roof, no mice in the walls, no spiders in the cellar, just absence. And the feeling that something was watching from inside the walls, watching you. After the twins returned, things got worse. At night, they walked the halls barefoot, in sync, like they were tracing some invisible pattern, whispering, counting, marking the walls with chalk symbols that weren't there by morning. Their father tried to paint over them once. The brush dried mid-stroke, the paint peeled backwards. Then came the voices. Low, like distant thunder, but layered, hundreds, maybe thousands, murmuring beneath the floorboards. The twins sat in the corner of the parlour, eyes wide, listening to the boards speak. One night a guest stayed over. He screamed for 29 minutes straight, clawed through the plaster, tried to jump down the well. When they dragged him back, he just kept repeating one sentence. "There's someone else inside the wall, pretending to be me." That house didn't shelter the twins. It reflected them. Or worse, amplified them. No one remembered when the well was dug. It wasn't on any surveyor's map. The stones didn't match local quarry rock, and it was too deep. The rope lowered 187 feet before it vanished into blackness. No echo, no splash, no bottom. The twins were drawn to it. They'd sit on the edge for hours, heads cocked, as if listening to something whispering up from the dark. One morning, their mother caught them lowering a dead fox down on a chain. When she pulled it back up, the body was gone, but the chain was wet and covered in tiny handprints. After that, the animals stopped coming. The crickets, the frogs, even the dogs refused to approach the property line. Something beneath the house had claimed the land, and the twins were its messengers. They began speaking in unison, but not to their parents. They were reciting things, names, dates, ancient-sounding words no one recognized, sometimes backwards, sometimes in frequencies too low to be human. One day, the youngest Morrison boy, a cousin, vanished. Last seen walking toward the well with the twins. They told the sheriff he'd gone home. The next week his voice was heard coming up from the well, begging, crying, then laughing in two voices. When they tried to fill the well with stones, something pushed them back out overnight. The twins began drawing circles in ash around the wellhead, not for protection, for containment. Something had been opened, and the well was no longer a hole. It was a gate. October 1834. The blood moon rose red and low like an eye swollen shut. The crops around the Morrison farm were dying in patterns. Not from drought, but something feeding. Circular patches of rotting corn, livestock found bloodless but untouched, as if drained through their shadow. The locals began whispering again. Not about the twins, but about what the twins had brought. That night, the Reverend's daughter came screaming down the hollow road, barefoot and shaking. She said she'd seen the Morrison twins standing naked in the cornfield, eyes rolled back, hands raised, and behind them, something else. She described it as a man with no skin, crowned with antlers, smiling without lips. She said it was harvesting. They found her dress torn and soaked in a thick, black sap. Her feet blistered from walking across earth, hot as a stove. That same night, 10 other children had the same dream. A tunnel of roots. A voice calling them downward. And 2 faces waiting in the dark. The town called for a prayer vigil. But the church bell rang 13 times on its own before anyone could gather. By morning, the pastor's heart had stopped, not from age, from terror. He died, clutching a page torn from Revelation. But the text was rewritten, same verse, same chapter, but every word replaced with the same 2 names, Abel, Asa, Abel, Asa, Abel, Asa. They weren't just children now, they were seeds, and the harvest had begun. 3 weeks after the blood moon, Sheriff Tate received a package. No return address. Sealed in wax. Inside was a book, bound in what appeared to be flayed calf skin, but warm to the touch. The ink? Red, faded, metallic. It smelled like iron. The cover bore no title, just a circle of 12 eyes, all open, all bleeding. And in the center, an X carved in with a bone stylus. They called it the ledger. But it wasn't just records, it was a catalogue of debts, names, dates, prices paid. And something worse. Assets acquired. The first name listed, Mary Ellen Morrison. Died 1834. Reaped. Womb of duality, gate opened. Then came the twins. Abel, body marked, void within. Asa, voice prepared, mind erased. Others followed, locals, strangers. People no one remembered losing. Each soul had a value. Not in dollars, but in phrases. One blink from the hollow one. 3 feet of salt burned clean. A month of silence purchased. The language wasn't English. It bled through English, and anyone who read it out loud suffered seizures, or worse, became fluent. One deputy tried to destroy it, burned it in the town square. But the fire died. The pages remained, and his mouth filled with dirt until he drowned in soil. The ledger was a covenant, written by something old, kept by those marked. And now opened by the wrong hands. By 1835, the Morrison twins weren't just in the book, they were writing it. By spring of 1835, something had returned to Black Hollow. Not someone, something. The grist mill east of town, long abandoned after the river changed course, began turning again. No water wheel, no workers. But the grindstone spun every night, by itself. At first they thought it was wind, then rats, then a cruel joke. But then came the sounds, not mechanical, not human. Low moans, metallic clanks, and the rhythmic crunching of teeth on stone. Sheriff Tate and 4 others entered the mill on May 3rd. Only one came out. Blind, hair gone white, mouth sewn shut, not with thread, but sinew pulled from his own wrists. He scratched one word into the dirt before dying. Hungry. The townsfolk sealed the mill with salt and iron nails. But each morning the door was open again, and the ground beneath it, soft, breathing. They began calling it the mouth, because it wasn't a building anymore, it was a threshold. Something had burrowed beneath the structure. A tunnel, yes, but also a throat, and every so often it spoke, not with words, with echoes. It coughed up items no one remembered losing: a child's shoe from 1821, a rusted wedding ring, an ear, and once a second ledger. Blank. Except for one page: "Feed us the boy who sings, or we will unseal the well." The Morrison twins weren't missing. They were nested inside. The mouth, writing, singing, waiting. They called themselves stewards, guardians of knowledge, protectors of the balance. But what they really were was custodians of a wound, and they kept it open on purpose. The Brotherhood of the Ninth Bell was founded in 1791, the same year Kentucky became a state. 9 men. 9 oaths. 9 bells forged from British cannons, each tuned to a different frequency of fear. Their task was clear: monitor the hollow, document the breaches, and when necessary, feed the mouth. Because they believed something ancient slumbered below Kentucky limestone. Not a demon, not a god, but a signal. Older than Babel, older than breath, and it wanted out. They didn't worship it. They studied it, tried to map its language in ink and sinew, carved symbols into bone, measured madness like a science. But over time, the Brotherhood stopped observing and began assisting. They orchestrated disappearances, harvested bloodlines, even arranged for twins to be born under eclipses. Morrison wasn't just a family, it was a formula. They bred the twins like instruments, so when the mouth sang, the boys could answer back, in harmony. And that's why, in 1834, the Brotherhood didn't stop the disappearances, didn't seal the mouth, didn't warn the town. Because for the first time in decades, the 9th bell rang by itself, and they knew. It was ready to listen. Beneath the Morrison farmhouse there is no basement. There never was, only a shaft. Carved not by tools, but by something moving upward from below. Locals called it the well that bled. They said it whispered at night, sucked the warmth from animals, turned milk sour. And when the wind blew just right, you could hear something, crying in reverse. The flesh chasm wasn't dirt or rock. It was soft, veined, pulsing, like the inside of a lung that forgot how to breathe. And at the bottom, not a floor, but a membrane, translucent, alive, beating to the rhythm of 2 hearts that never learned to separate. This is where the twins were taken, not by force, but by call. Every Morrison child dreamed of the chasm, saw it behind their eyelids, felt it hum in their bones. But only Elijah and Samuel answered, because only they were in tune. They descended naked, no light, no rope, just the sound of their feet slapping warm meat as they were swallowed by something that had waited centuries to wear their voices. It wasn't death. It wasn't a ritual. It was a birth canal, because the thing in the hollow didn't want followers. It wanted vessels, twins, mirrors, and when they reached the bottom it opened its eye, not to see them, but to project. What came next? It was never meant to be found. A slim, iron-bound book wrapped in flesh parchment, buried in the walls of the Morrison property behind a layer of consecrated brick. It smelled like ozone and rot, and when touched it made your bones hum like tuning forks struck beneath the skin. They called it the Echo Archive. Inside, a catalogue of symbols, written in ink made of carbon, blood, and ash. Each page, a ritual. Each symbol, a summoning. Each name, a sacrifice. At the top of the ledger, House of the Hollow. Brotherhood of the Split Mirror. Project Gemini. And beneath that, 2 entries. Elijah Morrison, Samuel Morrison. Next to each, a glyph that shifts under the eye. 1/2 angelic, 1/2 biomechanical. No one knows how the archive writes itself. But it's not passive. It records actions before they happen. In 1831 it listed the twins. In 1834 it marked them as activated, but there's a final page, ripped out, burned at the edges. But not before one phrase was transcribed. When mirror meets mirror, the veil will burst, and the world will see its true face. The Brotherhood wasn't studying the twins, they were preparing them, grooming them as keys, to open something ancient, something buried beneath language, something only perfect reflections could unlock. That's why the Morrison name was erased, not to hide evil, but to delay it. July 3rd, 1834. A night of still air and swollen clouds. The townspeople gathered for the summer solstice sermon, but the Morrison twins never arrived. The preacher stopped mid-verse. A scream tore through the chapel window. Then the bells began ringing themselves backward. The sheriff, Elijah Grant, sprinted up the hill. He arrived at the Morrison house to find the door open and the entire structure vibrating. No wind, no sound, just that unnatural hum from the bones of the building. Inside, the walls were peeling themselves back. Wood and plaster curling like paper in fire. And in the center of the parlor, the twins stood face to face. Motionless, eyes locked. Between them hung a sheen in the air, like oil on water, not a mirror, but a mirror field, a distortion, a reflection of a place not here, but intimately watching. The sheriff stepped forward. And that's when it happened. Samuel convulsed. Blood wept from his ears. Veins blackened. His mouth opened, and a second voice came out. Not his, not human. It spoke in reverse Latin, a language known only to inverted clergy. Elijah simply stared. He didn't move, didn't resist, just reached out and touched the distortion. In an instant, light bent inward. Walls collapsed into themselves, and the Morrison house didn't explode. It imploded. Silence fell. No ash, no debris. Just a perfect circle of scorched earth, and a single object left behind. A silver coin marked with the eye of Ra. Split down the middle. 2 nights after the implosion, a man in grey arrived in Marion. No carriage, no horse, no footprints, just the sound of a cane tapping cobblestone where no road had ever been laid. They called him the Collector. But he gave no name, only a request. Bring me what reflects, and I'll show you what's true." He carried no luggage, only a valise of polished obsidian mirrors, each one framed in unfamiliar symbols. Not Hebrew, not Greek, but something older. Pre-flood. The townsfolk, still reeling from the Morrison event, were drawn to him like moths to rot. They handed over heirlooms, mirrors from homes, shards of old vanity glass, even silver trays. Anything that had ever held a reflection. He inspected each piece and spoke to it, softly, lovingly, as if each fragment were a wounded child. Those he rejected, he crushed them underfoot, and the dust rose upward, not down. But the ones he accepted, he placed into his valise, and every time he did, his shadow grew longer. By dawn, the collector had vanished, but his room at the inn remained sealed. When it was finally opened, they found something impossible. A single, standing mirror, 7 feet tall, carved from whalebone, still warm to the touch, and scrawled in condensation on the inside, "He is not gone, he is split." When workers attempted to demolish the ruins of the Morrison home, their tools shattered, steel bent like wax. Engines failed mid-rev. One man vomited blood after striking the basement foundation, so they brought in horses, chains, shovels, human grit. But no matter how deep they dug, they hit something hard, circular, breathing. At dawn on the 3rd day, a young boy wandered down into the crater. He didn't speak, just pointed to the ground and whispered, "It's listening." Then he began to dig with his bare hands. Beneath the charred beams and fossilized ash, they uncovered a spiral carved into limestone, precise and endless, like it had no center, no origin, just descent. Down and down and down. And from the center of the spiral, even in the dead of summer, frost bloomed. Surveyors were called in. They mapped the glyph. A local pastor claimed it matched an engraving on the tomb of Apollyon's Gate, a lost monastery in Syria that burned before Christ was born. Then the dogs began to howl. Not bark, howl. They clawed at the earth, eyes wide, refusing to go near the spiral. Several dropped dead before sundown. Their tongues were black, and still the spiral remained, not worn by time, but sharpened by it. It was not made by hands, it was made for them. 3 days after the spiral was uncovered, a man in black arrived. No passport, no luggage, just a sealed leather case and a crucifix made of obsidian. He did not speak to locals. He did not sleep. He wore a ring with a crossed key, the symbol of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Rome's secretive enforcers of orthodoxy. To them, heresy isn't punished. It's erased. He was not a priest. He was something older. He requested, no, demanded, access to the spiral. And when he saw it, he went pale. He opened his case. Inside, a single book, hand-bound in calfskin, marked in Latin, Index Librarum Prohibitorum, the index of forbidden texts. He turned to a page deep within, not with fear, but recognition. The spiral was there, an exact match, beneath a woodcut of a two-headed infant, nursing from a wolf, beneath the phrase, de profundis venient, et portas confundant. From the depths they shall come, and the gates shall fail. But one page before that was ripped out, not torn, clawed, as if something had escaped the book itself. He closed it, lit incense, and began to chant in a dialect not spoken by any living man. Locals said he didn't blink for 3 hours, that his shadow moved on its own, and when the sun set, he said only 4 words, "You were not first." Then he buried the book, drove to the river, and walked into it. They never found his body. But the spiral deepened. After the man in black vanished, the house was sealed. Not by police, not by state officials, but by uniformed men with no insignia, no names, no plates on their trucks. Locals were told it was a meth contamination site. But the air didn't reek of chemicals, it reeked of ozone and old blood. They deployed GPR arrays, thermal mapping drones, and something no one recognized, a tall copper device that hummed without electricity. The goal? To reach the chamber beneath the spiral, the one that hadn't been opened since 1834. They sent a team of 6, 3 ex-special forces, 2 deep earth geologists, and a woman fluent in Proto-Sumerian. They wore full-body suits, and all were chipped with subdermal trackers. Descent began at 0 or 30 hours. They passed the spiral and vanished from visual contact 67 feet down. Then the feed cut. No screams, no collapse, just static. The tracking showed movement, but not down, not horizontal. They were moving in curves. For 6 minutes, the trackers formed a perfect loop. Then they stopped. The last transmission, a single audio burst, 3 seconds, heavily garbled, but slowed down, enhanced, isolated. You can hear it. A child's voice whispering in reverse. Tell her the twins remember. Then, silence. The military pulled out. Welded steel over the basement. Poured 12 feet of concrete. But last year, in 2024, that seal cracked from beneath, and something small crawled out. There was an inscription carved deep into the spiral's final curve, hidden beneath layers of plaster, flesh, and salt. A language older than Latin, older than Sumerian, older than human history. The linguists who saw it, just one glance, went silent. Not afraid, ashamed, because they understood what it meant. The inscription read, "They are not twins. They are the 2 halves of what we buried in Eden." That spiral? Not a staircase, a lock. A sealing mechanism. And the house was the keyhole. And then, you were not supposed to know this. You were supposed to scroll past. Laugh, dismiss, forget. But something made you stop. Watch, listen. Maybe it was the chill you felt when the child whispered. Maybe it was the dream you had last year. The one you never told anyone about. The one with the door in the field, and the twins standing in front of it, holding your name. You weren't watching this story. You were being summoned to it. Because you carry the mark. A strand in your blood. A pattern in your dreams. A number you keep seeing, 1834. You were chosen to remember what the world is designed to forget. Because the spiral is waking again, and when it opens, it will call the ones who heard the story. It just did.